it is 11 o'clock. I have 11 o'clock now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's topic is, oh, hold on one second. Let me just get everything sorted in the back end here. So today's topic for the webinar is ergonomics on the run. And what we're really talking about today is portable technology and the impact on the workplace. And I've added in some other elements that I want to talk about as well that are sort of connected to the changing face of the office workplace, because there have been a lot of changes over the last 5 years or so, probably the last 10 years, and then what the implications are. I basically led the topics today based on what my employees and are reporting to me that their clients are talking about, and what I'm hearing from my clients about what their challenges are related to office ergonomics. So that's sort of how I've guided today. If you are new to our webinar series, the topic of question that we always get is, will the webinar be available after the webinar presentation today? And the answer is yes. We record every webinar, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. And Julie, our admin person, will send those out or the link out after the webinar is over today. So we will process that recording and get it out to you, so you can review it or share it with anybody that you think should listen to the content. And then if you do need any tech support or anything today, that is something that GoToWebinar provides. So there are links and things available, should be available to you in the chat, in the menu options on the right-hand side. So if you are struggling with sound or anything else, please see if you can reach out to GoToWebinar. They should be able to provide you with some support for that. So without any further ado, let's chat, sort of look at what the map is for today's webinar. So firstly, I think I would be remiss anytime we talk about office ergonomics just to review standards and guidelines that are out there, because this is actually something that has changed over the last year. There are some standards and new guidelines coming for office ergonomics that I want to make sure everybody who is attending today is aware of. We're not going to go into them in great detail. That's not the purpose of today, but I think I would be remiss in my duty as an ergonomist to communicate to you that there are new or updated standards and new guidelines coming that you would probably want to be aware of and look for and hopefully get access to moving forward. So we are going to talk briefly about those today, but very briefly, mostly an awareness moment here. And then we're going to talk about a couple different pieces. We're going to talk about mobile technology, and we're going to focus on tablets or smartphones would fall into that category as well. And then we're going to talk about laptops and how they're being used in our ever-changing office workplace, and then how that connects in some ways to the trends that we're seeing in the office environment and what the pros and cons are. We're going to chat about strategies as we go through here, because I thought that was probably the most value-added piece for everybody in attendance, is what are the strategies that our clients are using, what are strategies out there, best practices that we're seeing from any literature or research that's happening, trying to share that with you today. If you do have a question as we go along, and there are likely to be several because this topic is popular and very relevant to everybody, please share it in the question box. I will do my best to answer them as we go along, because obviously they'll be relevant to the piece that we're talking about at the time. If I do miss any, I will go back at the end and make sure that I've captured all of those things. So, all right, I got my chat box open here so I don't miss anything. All right, so let's chat about office ergonomics. So the first part I said I want to talk to you about today is just standards and guidelines. Really, I want to talk about two specific items or documents that you may be interested in referencing or getting a hold of. The first one is the CSA standard on office ergonomics. Now, this one has been out for a little while. So it came out in December of 2017. So it's been out for a year and a half or so at this point. But it used to be a guideline. That's probably the biggest message for folks that are out there, is that this used to be a guideline. It has converted to a standard, and more importantly for everybody in my world, is it went through a major upgrade. The last couple iterations of this document didn't go through massive changes, but this one has. And so the newest version speaks to things like tablets in the workplace, laptops in the workplace. The pictures are finally no longer giant CRT tube monitors. They are actually flat screens like what you're going to have at your workplace today. It talks about the sitting and standing. It talks about various postures through that. It talks about when you would want to choose sitting and standing. What are some of the ratios you should be looking at in terms of how long people sit versus stand. So it has really done an update to modernize itself to the workplace that you are living in right now. And so if you have not gotten a hold of that before, or don't have a copy of that yet, and your group and your workplace does subscribe to CSA or does purchase CSA standards and guidelines, that is something that you may want to grab a hold of. It is quite a big document, but there are sections that probably aren't super relevant to you, more details about specifics on chairs and measurements and whatnot. If you jump through that book, you'll find that there are a lot of really value-added pieces speaking to what's current in the workplace. So I want to grab that today very briefly and share that one. The one that is new, and when I say new, I mean it's not even actually out yet, so it's very new. I suspect that they'll be rolling it out officially in October, but that's my guess with the Ergonomics month in October. The CRE MSD out of the University of Waterloo, who manages the MSD Prevention Guidelines website, ultimately has been building things on this website for the last while. It looks awesome. I'm really loving the website and all the things that it provides to our clients about ergonomic education, but they didn't have anything specifically related to office. And that is true for the old, if you're used to the MSD Prevention Guidelines books. They didn't have anything office specific in there either, but they've identified that that's a bit of a gap and have decided to move forward with building an office ergonomic toolkit, for lack of a better description. It's a guide that will walk you through some basic about office ergonomics. It includes some posters that you can use for your workplace. It's just a great general resource tool. It was available in draft version until the end of maybe July, I think, or maybe June. I can't recall which month it went down, but it was. So I have seen a copy of it. I do like it. I think it's a good resource. So as soon as that becomes available, we'll absolutely be sharing it online and in our social media posts. So please follow us if you don't yet. You'll get all that information there. But you can, if you do hop onto MSD Prevention Guidelines for Ontario's website, you will be able to find this as soon as obviously it becomes available. So that one's another nice new one that is coming available soon. So I mentioned a couple of key updates. I think I've jumped ahead of myself a little bit here. Key updates specifically in the CSA standard. It's concise. It's definitely easier to read. It talks. The term "shall" has shown up because it is now a standard and not a guideline. But the part that is most relevant today is that modernization piece, right? It now talks about individual workspaces, talks about shared workspaces, which a lot of us have at our workplace, talks about sitting and standing, and talks about mobile technology. So that is probably that center section is really the big or the key piece that we found that were relevant to, or that I pulled out that was relevant to today's topic. These are a couple posters. I mentioned that the MSD Prevention Guidelines will have a couple of posters. Each one of the sort of basic kits, which the Office Ergonomics will be one of those basic kits, have some great posters associated with them. And so the Office Ergonomic one is no different. And so when it becomes available, they will have some general guideline posters like the one you see on the left there. It talks about various working postures, talks about support of the back and other body parts, talks about the vision element associated with the workstation, reaching, talks about layout, etc. So it's got all kinds of different information that you can grab and use, and you might find them just useful for a safety board or whatnot. So that's one of the features in that new office guideline that's coming out that I think you might find really useful when it does finally arrive. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into what the real topic of today was. I want to start by talking about the actual technology changes that we're seeing and the implications of our workplace. Maybe if you are sitting beside your keyboard there, if you can type in maybe a handful of examples. You can throw it in the chat or the question, but throw me 1 or 2 examples from your workplace where your staff are using mobile technology in maybe in a different way or a unique way. I mean, we've used a laptop as a desktop forever, right, where people are using that as their main computer source. I actually don't see desktops nearly as often as I see laptops when I go do office workstations, but I'd be curious to know the people who are on today, how else you're using that mobile technology. How are your staff using tablets? How are they using smartphones? How are they using laptops in different ways? Maybe laptops that become tablets or that are touchscreen that are different and that you engage differently. So if you can throw some of those comments in there, that would be super helpful to guide some of my next comments and discussion. So I'll give you a second to do that. First one up there is vehicle use of laptops or tablets. Super popular, totally get it. And I'm going to talk about that today, so that one for sure. And some touchscreen use, yes, and I agree. Another municipal specific one, paramedics do most of their paperwork, quote unquote. I know we still call it paperwork, even though it's not paperwork, on tablets. Very true, just about everywhere. There's a lot of people that do their paperwork on tablets. Working from home, use of a Surface for a desktop and out on the production floor. Okay, so this is a new change that we've seen. I still don't see it as often as you might think, but the Microsoft Surface is a very powerful little tablet, essentially, that we often use as a desktop computer because it has that capability or that power, depending on what version you're talking about. So we can talk a little bit about the Surface. I didn't specifically highlight that, but we can totally do that. So keep those comments coming in here. I'm going to flip the next screen and keep talking, but any way you're using those tablets or laptops or smartphones, I'm curious to see how else we're using that technology. So let's do a quick summary of tablets in general. There are some amazing advantages to a tablet, whether it is a Samsung, an iPad, a Microsoft Surface, it doesn't matter what it is. The tablet has some amazing advantages. It is a display that obviously is combined with a touch screen, and primarily, not always, but primarily how we see people engaging with the tablet is via the touch screen. Some have accessories like a keyboard or something else. Surface is a common one you see that for, but a lot of folks are using almost exclusively the touch screen technology for data entry when they're engaging with whatever apps they're working on, right? So significant advantages here, obviously, that it's very portable and way lighter than a typical laptop. So, you know, a laptop is, well, depending on laptop, is 3 to 5 pounds, let's say. A tablet is significantly less than that, right? It's a fraction of that. So you might get a tablet that is a pound or maybe even less, depending on the size, maybe even a little more, again, depending on the size, right? So they are much lighter weight than a laptop, much easier. That makes them easier to carry around. They're smaller, so they can fit into various different holders. If you're talking about a smartphone even, which I didn't specifically highlight today, it fits in a pocket, right? And it's got all of that information that's in there, and so that all gives you different ways or different pros that, you know, why we are moving to tablet form. The significant disadvantages with a tablet for data entry or for engagement with the technology is primarily posture related, and all my examples really beyond that are all about posture. The postures associated with tablet use are not great, right? So the ergonomics of tablet use is not fabulous. If you think about the way you use a tablet, primarily you are going to hold it in your hand somewhere close to elbow height, right? If we're talking about it being truly portable, we're holding it in our hand somewhere close to elbow height, which means we're looking down. So you got a significant neck posture to look straight down. Our other hand is doing data entry, and data entry on a tablet is not super accurate. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before, but the tactile element of a keyboard or something that has like ridges and edges to it, like a keyboard, the individual keys on a keyboard, allows for more accurate keying. So you probably make, if you think about it, you probably make a lot of mistakes on a tablet as well as on a smartphone, maybe more on a smartphone because it's smaller. And so you're constantly, if you want to get accurate, you're going to be making a lot of changes in order to accurately address it. And so ultimately the gripping and handling element is significant here as well, because you have to hold it with one hand while you are keying and typing with the second hand, right? So that's a factor that can be challenging. And although they are significantly lighter than a laptop, holding something for 4 hours a day while someone is out doing some sort of inspection, right? And they are going to be walking around holding that for a long period of time, Think about like enforcement officers or bylaw officers in a municipality. If they're going out and printing tickets or something on that type of device, then they're going to be carrying that around for a very long period of time. And so the gripping and handling element is not to be understated. Although it's very lightweight, if I hold it for the next 4 to 6 hours, I'm still potentially going to have some issues with that. So those are all factors. And then obviously the screen is much smaller than the big screen that you have at your desk, or even your laptop screen, which in many cases is too small. Now we're getting even smaller, talking about a laptop, or talking about a tablet or a smartphone. So there are some advantages, very obviously, and I'm sure that's why most people are moving towards this technology. The portability is a key element here, but the disadvantages really almost all come from an ergonomic perspective. So a couple notes that are popping up here as I go along is about cases that allow it to be supported in a tilted position. Does the tablet have a case that allows it to be supported? I'm going to talk about a couple different examples. There are lots of things out there, and there are lots of cases out there that can do this. I'm going to pull up a couple different examples of things that I thought were just interesting technology add-ons or accessories that can help manage or mitigate some of the issues associated with tablet use. So let's chat about that as we go forward here. All right, so some general rule of thumb. So if you are implementing tablet use at your workplace, so this is something that you're going to be using way more consistently, then ultimately we should be mindful of how we're using it and how we're asking our staff to use it, which probably comes back to the accessory element that we're going to talk about. Number one is some literature is coming out over the last couple of years is suggesting that we should not hold a static posture, for example, looking down at a tablet or a cell phone, or holding something in front of our body on a 20-degree angle as we look at it at the screen. And so we have awkward elbow posture, probably have a wide grip stand. All of those are awkward or non-neutral postures that we're holding for a prolonged period of time. Recommendations is that when we're talking about tablet use, that we're talking about less than 10 minutes at a time. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to use the tablet for only 10 minutes, but it means that you need to be able to start to move around and do other and move throughout the day. So you're not going to stand in a stationary position for long periods of time. So folks who are using this intermittently, right, they are entering information and then they're moving on to another workstation or another environment before they enter new data. Like I followed folks around at one point that worked for Enbridge, for example, and they had a tablet, they entered data at whatever meter we were at, then they put the tablet down essentially while they walked to the next location, picked it back up, entered the relevant data, were able to put it down, or in it, when I say put down, I mean in a case or somewhere on the side of their body where they weren't holding it, and they got that break from the posture. So that postural element is, it was less relevant for them, right? Because they were using it more intermittent-like. So how you use the tablet really plays a big role in its success. You want it to be as hands-free as possible. So my example, they're able to put it down or relax it throughout the day, relax those postures throughout the day, so the device becomes as hands-free as possible. Something that is a general rule of thumb, no pun intended, a general rule of thumb moving forward is that when we are looking at the data input, we'll want to be focusing on training staff to use their fingers for data entry, not their thumbs. Our thumbs are not really intended for that kind of repetitive work, also typically not as accurate. And so what you get is you get a lot of people who are struggling with thumb discomfort, de Quervain's disease, there's a whole bunch of them that could be, but ultimately data entry with our thumbs is not ideal. So the focus should be on finger data entry, so using those fingers as much as possible. But more importantly, it sort of goes back to the very base way that we use or design our software or apps that we're putting on our tablets, is that we need to focus on how the data entry is happening in the first place, right? That if we can, when we're designing the software should be designed so that there's minimal data entry in terms of keystrokes. I don't want to type in a whole bunch of information on this tablet. It's not efficient. It's not a great way to tackle this process. So it's slow, likely to cause errors. So it's likely to cause errors. It's slow, and it is time consuming, right? To essentially to manually enter all this data by typing it in with our fingers, right? What we want to look at is more strategies in the software design that includes more frequent use of things like checklists. So they're just tapping and checking off boxes rather than actually manually entering any data. Want to use drop-down menus when that is appropriate, right? Because you can click the drop-down arrow, pick the item that you want, and move forwards with 2 button presses rather than manually typing something in. Even better if your tablet and technology speak to each other and you can actually talk to text. So if your staff can be out in the field doing work and speaking to the tablet to record data in the various fields that are present in whatever form they're filling out, talk to text is a great way to eliminate or reduce the number of keystrokes. And then beyond that, well, those are sort of some software changes that you can be making, but beyond that, we want to be looking at what accessories do our staff need? How are they using this tablet? How can I take some of the stress and strain and awkward positions out of the work that they are doing? So there are lots of things that are out there, and it really depends on how you're going to use it, right? So I pulled out 2 random examples when I was prepping this webinar, and there are literally hundreds out there. But the one on the left, obviously, is essentially a keyboard that is a Bluetooth keyboard linked to a tablet. And this keyboard also has a stand, right? So it allows the tablet to stand upright or more upright while you are typing on what is a small keyboard, but a better or more ergonomically friendly than tapping right onto the screen, right? Using the touch screen technology. So essentially, we're converting our tablet, whenever practical, into a more desktop-based computer. So the question earlier was about a Surface for a desktop, and this is something I've seen more frequently, although still not as common as I expected it to be. It's actually something that I'm considering going to myself with my next computer purchase. But the idea that a Surface or a tablet like that can be really flexible, right? We can take it, I can pick it up off the desktop and take it out onto the plant or production floor, complete my workplace inspections or other forms that I have to complete while I'm out there, bring it back in, drop it back into its holder, and essentially it becomes my desktop again. And it will essentially project onto a main screen. I can also attach a keyboard and a mouse to it. So I essentially have a full computer, but my tablet also allows for extreme portability when I can pick it up and go. So we do have some of those options depending on the tablet that you're looking for. But obviously, that is more relevant for someone who is using it like that, right? Somebody who is going to pick it up and walk out, complete something for half an hour, bring it back into the office, drop it back in like it's a laptop, essentially. Just happens to be a whole lot smaller and more portable. And so those are options for folks like that. But I'm obviously not going to give my field worker a keyboard and a stand like that and ask them to find a place to put it down while my Enbridge worker going house to house is walking around with there's no table, there's no place to put it down. That's not going to happen, right? So for those folks, we need to look at other technology accessories. There are lots of them, again, out there, but these are some examples. This one I like because it's actually super versatile, and the name of the company is going to escape me right now. Some UA gear, universal something gear. I've forgotten what the middle word is, but I can look it up if you're interested. And it actually provides, in my opinion, one of the most flexible options for how you would support your tablet while you're working. So this device, you can maybe see in the picture, where in the center at the back, it's got kind of that wide, the wide strip that says UAG on it. That wide strip is actually a handhold. You would stick your hand underneath there, so you would have the tablet essentially strapped to your hand, and you can adjust that to the size of your hand, so it is a Velcro strap, but you slip your hand underneath there, and it essentially straps the tablet to your hand, which significantly minimizes the gripping required, right? So that's making one-step improvements. That's one option. You can see in the background there, the same exact stand or device accessory allows that tablet to sit upright on that angle, so you can see it working in the tilted position. So if you were going to have a work desk or someplace that you could stop for a few minutes to perform data entry, you could prop it up and be able to enter data in a more upright position. So then you don't have to hold it at all. It is angled towards you. It's not flat on the desk, so it's improving neck postures. That's a nice option. And then the third version, the third piece that this one has, which I also like, is essentially a shoulder strap, right? That it would go over your shoulder so you don't have to hold it while you're walking from location to location, or you're traveling around the plant floor, or out performing data entry in a field somewhere, right? You can throw this over your shoulder and carry it along like as if it was a purse or a bag of some kind that you can take with you without also having to carry a bag, right? So you can have sort of this device does it all in one. And there are different ones that are out there, right? So some do just the hand strap, some do just the shoulder strap. It really depends on what you need the device to be able to do, how long someone's going to be required to use it. But it's interesting just to see how many different ways that we could potentially interact with the tablet. I suspect there are ones out there that also could be wrapped around your neck, for example, and maybe help the tablet prop up in front of you in some capacity. I think there are lots of them out there that do different things. So you need to figure out which postures you want to minimize, and then look for a device that is practical for the staff you're thinking about applying it to that would address the concerns or the issue. Any questions about tablets? Because the next thing I'm going to talk about laptops, both in the office and in the vehicle. So if you've got a question about tablets, now's the time. Okay. So in terms of laptop use in the office, I wanted to highlight this just because I think it's still an important conversation. I don't see this as an issue very often anymore, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. That ultimately, when it comes down to a laptop, is by far the most common computer that I see in an office. It's very rare that I see a desktop nowadays, but really when it comes down to it, the CSA standard talks about this. We've been talking about it forever, that a laptop is not really meant to be used as a full-time computer without additional accessories. So when you're talking about a laptop, if you're in an office, it should have a docking station. Ideally, you have a full screen monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, and any other accessories that you may need. But at very minimum, a full screen monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse to create what is essentially the feel of a desktop with your laptop running as a hard drive only. And so that is still probably the most important step or feature that people should be looking for when they're trying to figure out how to navigate laptops in the office environment. It is what I would recommend. Now that said, our office environments don't always look like a formal office environment. We'll talk about different ones, but in the future. But what I see a lot with one of my clients actually is that they are a large hotel chain, and some of their staff travel to their various hotels or locations for meetings and work locations. So they're flying all across the world in order to spend 2 and 3 weeks at a different location, or traveling around seeing multiple hotels. And one of their challenges is that their work location changes a lot, right? They work wherever they are, wherever is available when they are there. And so what we see for them is the idea that they use their laptop as the monitor. So they're not going to take with them a full screen, a full monitor with them. That's not practical nor feasible on a plane. What they do take is a laptop, and then figure out how they're going to get some technology add-ons. They're looking for a keyboard, and they're looking for a mouse that are packable and travelable, that will travel well, and they'll be able to unroll at the new location, pop up their laptop, make that their screen, and then add on their keyboard and their mouse. So that's the very bare minimum. But if we can convert it into a desktop, add a docking station, add a monitor, that's better overall for full setup. Right, so that's the very basics of laptops in an office workstation. I think everybody is probably on that page. I don't want to spend too much time here. Now, laptops in a vehicle, on the other hand, there is all kinds of things that are out there. Specifically, I think we know the advantages. They are hands-free, super efficiency of information. We see them a lot with first responders. That's a very common group that we see it in. You're also going to see laptops in vehicles when you have like technicians, for example, doing service calls. It's very common to see laptops or tablets mounted in a vehicle for them. And so there are distinct advantages with the efficiency or delivery of information and the hands-free element. And it can run your GPS and do all kinds of other things for you while you're in the vehicle. So there's a lot of real pros here to what this technology can do for us. But the disadvantages are probably the same, essentially different in terms of how it rolls out, but ultimately the principles are the same, or the hazards are the same, is really looking at posture is probably the biggest issue, and everything else I've got listed below drives poor posture, right? Where the tablet or the laptop is mounted in the vehicle significantly impacts your back posture, your neck posture, your shoulder, hand, wrist posture, maybe of both hands or one hand, depending on how you use and engage with the technology there. And so the posture is significantly impacted depending on where this device is mounted in the vehicle. The angle that it's mounted on, the height that it's mounted at, significantly impacts the posture elements as well, right? If it is angled slightly upwards, you're going to have better neck postures, but maybe poor shoulder postures, a lot more reaching potentially. If the keyboard, if there is a keyboard, if we're talking about a laptop and not a tablet, and there is a physical keyboard, its size and location are relevant here. If there's not a keyboard and it is a touch screen, because we're talking about a tablet in the vehicle, then we are looking at the combinations of the angle and the height of the tablet, and that impacts your postures associated with that. And more importantly, the exposure duration. How long are we having people work on a laptop in a vehicle? It may seem, in some cases, not as much as you think, right? That the tablet or the laptop is there and available, but they actually take it out quite regularly. So they would take it into their service call because they need it to provide a diagnostic or something. They might enter some basic data in there, but perhaps more importantly, they're receiving information from it, not actually entering information. And so these are all things that you have to kind of navigate through about how you're using the laptop, because all of those things will impact the best location for a laptop to be stored in a vehicle. There was some great research, and I actually, in hindsight, I probably should have thrown it in here, but there was some really great research recently for a study that looked at different positioning of laptops, specifically laptops, not tablets, looking at different positioning of laptops in a vehicle, and evaluated 4 different positions. So one was essentially just to the right of the steering wheel, mounted at whatever height. And then the next one would have moved it slightly further away from the steering wheel. One would have mounted it almost in your armrest, pretty much to the side. And they just showed you different positions and the implications ergonomically of each of those positions. And there was the research was sort of supporting the idea that there's nowhere in a vehicle that a laptop or a tablet is ideally mounted. However, there are some that are better than others. And so evaluating those different postures and what your staff are actually exposed to and how they use the tablet or laptop will significantly impact the ideal mounting location. And one of the things we see this in is when you order a vehicle that has the mount already in it. We see that, for example, somebody mentioned paramedics earlier. We see that a lot. Yes, Catherine, the question is, do you know I know the article title of that research? I don't off the top of my head, but I will include it when we send out I think I probably have the study downloaded actually. So I'll include that article when I send out the webinar link later today. So I was going back to looking at when you talk about paramedics, we've seen a lot of paramedic vehicles over the last year and a half, and we see this quite commonly as the position or the mounting location for that laptop comes predetermined, right? So the ambulance arrives, the laptop mount is already there, you're docking your laptop into it, or your tablet, whatever you're using, and it's going right into there, and you don't have any flexibility or discussion about where this is going to go, what makes the most sense for your staff and how you're using it. It's just wherever is most convenient for it to fit in the front seat, right, in order to be accessed by whichever passenger or driver or both need to access it. And so those are things that ideally we're discussing up front and making decisions about mounts. If they're coming pre-existing into your vehicle and not being retrofitted in, we want to decide where they should go and making sure that our procurement specs include that element, that it is a significant feature if your staff are going to be on it for prolonged periods of time. All right, so things to think about. Really, there are 2 primary factors here. You have to make a decision when you're talking about laptops or tablets in a vehicle. You have to make a decision about essentially a trade-off between vision and working height or keyboard access. So this is probably something that you'll need to think about a little bit more, evaluate how your staff are using it. The vision element is really about is the program or the software they're working primarily delivering information or requiring minimal data input like checklists or drop-down menus, not a lot of typing and actual physical entry, then maybe we're going to focus on the visual element. How do we get the neck in the best posture possible, knowing that we don't actually have to touch this screen or this keyboard very often to perform data entry? So we're going to focus on neck postures to give us the best chance at reducing our risk of injury, right? On the flip side, if your programs and the software that your staff are engaging in require a lot more data entry and you're typing more frequently, then maybe we are choosing a laptop over a tablet because we can better enter data using a full laptop keyboard. And if that works, then if that's the case, then maybe we're focusing on the positioning of that keyboard, right? That the neck posture is actually less important because we're going to spend a lot more time reaching to the side and performing data entry on this keyboard device. So you really, I don't think in a vehicle you're going to achieve both. You can't really achieve both at an office on just a laptop. So if you're going to put a laptop in a vehicle, there's pretty much no way you can achieve ideal neck posture and ideal hand, wrist, shoulder posture. So you have to make a decision about which one you're going to prioritize, and that will be driven entirely by how it's being used and what technology or apps they're engaging with, how much typing they're doing versus how much visual information they're receiving, right? So those are all questions that you're going to explore. So there's not a magic bullet here about what is the ideal position, because it really depends on how you use it. But that's really the discussion you're going to be having. Should we be focusing on vision, or should we be focusing on typing height and working posture? Okay, so those are the two things you're going to sort of try and decide from. Okay. So the next part of today that drives some of actually sort of interestingly enough, connected back to the technology piece is talking a little bit about office trends. And this is, we send out before every webinar, we send out an opportunity for anyone to send us questions or things they want us to answer in the webinar. And this is actually one that came up as part of that webinar. So I want to talk about a couple different things related to office trends. One of them in particular is not really a trend, but it's still the thing I get a million questions about. So I wanted to make sure that I touch on this today and just talk about sort of best practices and work strategies. But then I also want to talk about the idea of hoteling and hot desking, and just how do we manage the telecommuting people, folks who don't have a dedicated workspace. What are we doing? What are the ergonomic implications? And then how that maybe connects to technology, because it does absolutely connect to the technology that we provide to them and that we expect them to use on a daily basis and how we expect them to use it. So the first part I want to talk about then for office trends is sit stand. And the two primary questions I get are, who gets to sit stand and what sit stand do they get? By far the two most common questions that I get about a sit stand workstation. And so I wanted to just give you some answers to that based on my personal experience and best practices that I think staff, that our clients are experiencing. So the first one is, who gets one? Always a tricky question, and there is no right or wrong answer here. Most clients fall into one of two categories. Almost everybody falls into one of two categories. We've been to several offices over the last 6 months where they have retrofitted the office or made an update or moved locations, whatever, bought new equipment, and they have bought sit-stand desks for everyone. And so that is one answer, and one we do see sometimes is that everyone in an office got one. So retrofitted, bought all new equipment, decided sit-stand was part of the process, they bought it for everybody. Awesome, make sure everybody has one, but at the same time, not always fiscally responsible depending on how the size of your office, whether you're public or private sector, et cetera, right? Buying 3,000 people sit-stand desks is probably cost prohibitive. Buying 20 people in a small office sit-stand desks might be reasonable, right? So this probably is entirely driven by the type of workplace that you are in and how many staff that you have. So I would say this one is in the minority. Not a lot of offices we see that everybody has a sit-stand desk, although it does happen, right? So that's option one, is everybody gets one, we're retrofitting, everybody's getting one. Way more commonly, we see people asking questions about the flip side. I can't afford to buy a sit stand for everyone. So how do I decide who gets one and who doesn't? And primarily, I would say the best practice that we've seen to date, at least in my experience, best practices, usually sit-stand requests are not just requests from the employee. Almost always, the client is requiring that a doctor's note is provided. So the doctor is suggesting that this person needs a sit-stand unit due to specific discomforts that they're having, and they are asking the employer to provide that. And so that's usually how the sit-stand conversation becomes even an option for an employee, is that a doctor has sort of driven that discussion. So that's sort of part one to that. Part two is that a lot of our clients have decided that, you know what, a doctor's note is not enough, that doctor has never been to their workplace, has no idea what the workstation setup looks like, has no idea what equipment we provided. They may be telling me that this person has significant back pain and they need a sit-stand unit, but what really is that they have a really terrible chair, right? And so they have this really terrible chair. So yeah, sitting is painful because their back is totally unsupported in the chair. The doctor has no way of knowing that. They have never been to the office. They do not know what the chair looks like. They don't know what features it does. And quite honestly, I would say that most doctors aren't up to 100% on their ergonomics in the office environment. So a lot of our clients have said, you know what, doctor's note is going to not prompt a sit-stand unit, it's going to prompt a ergonomic assessment. And the ergonomic assessor will either confirm that what the doctor's note says and a sit-stand is needed, or it will say, you know what, we were able to make all these other adjustments. We believe the root cause of this issue is actually driven by the chair, or. And so we don't believe that a sit-stand unit is necessary. Moving forward, you know, we would recommend that you make these changes, replace this person's chair, not talking about buying a sit-stand unit, right? And so that's essentially, in my experience, best practice suggests that is the route that that seems to work best for most people. And it just gives you some really good information. And more, just as importantly, it starts to drive the answer to the question, which one, right? So we have clients that are saying, okay, we'll get you a sit-stand desk, no problem. But I have no idea what one to buy, because just buying a sit-stand desk does not solve the problem if the ergonomic issues still exist at the workstation. So the ergonomic assessment driven by that doctor's note, if they agree that we need a sit-stand desk, is also should give me insight as to which model or which models I should be shopping for, or what criteria I should be looking for. For example, we need one that goes down to 26 inches. And not all of them do, because some of them sit on the desk, some of them drop below that height, some of them are fully height adjustable desks. There's lots of different options out there. So exploring which one can be answered, or that question of which one can be answered easily through the ergonomic assessment. The other way that we've seen some clients go is saying, you know what, a doctor's note does prompt you to get one. If the doctor says you need a sit-stand, fine. Who am I to argue with the doctor? We'll get you a sit-stand unit, but this is a temporary accommodation, right? That they've taken it from the accommodation side. This is not going to be provided to you full time. This is a soft tissue injury. It should have 4 to 6 weeks of recovery time. We're going to ask the doctor for an updated functional abilities form with additional medical information, or the physio or whoever, trying to get more updated information 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, whatever timeline you've decided, that is ultimately going to eventually drive the sit-stand desk being removed, right? So that we're going to mount one to your desk. We're going to make sure it fits you. But when you've recovered from your injury or your discomfort, we're going to take it back, because this is an accommodation. We don't have these everywhere in our office. Only people who have permanent restrictions are going to be allowed to have one full time. And if you are recover in your 6 weeks, right, we take it away and your discomfort starts to flare up again, then we need to explore some other options. Maybe eventually we do decide to make this permanent as your accommodation model, but the first is that it's a short-term accommodation. And we've seen some success with that as well. Nice thing is you don't have to have as many of them. And, you know, one of our clients, for example, has about 4 available, and they rotate them around. So as somebody needs a sit-stand, as they're recovering from some sort of injury, they're provided with it, very clear. They have to sign something to say that it is only a temporary accommodation. They take it back. And so after 4 to 6 weeks, they get entered in medical. This person's doing better. They're removing the sit-stand desk from their workstation. So it is intended to be a temporary thing. So that's another route that you could go to try and give people the accommodation and tools they need to feel better and get better at work. But once we get to that point, we're actually removing that as well. right? That it's not meant to be a permanent accommodation, just like most other stuff we do in the workplace. Not everything is meant to be permanent. So that would be another option as well. And there are a million different options. So the question of which one is actually a really important one. What we see most often is people buy the cheapest one. So if I've come in, somebody's bought a sit-stand desk, almost always they've bought a very inexpensive one. I get it. They can be very expensive. You don't want to, it's like a trial run. I'm going to buy one that's $300 or $400, figure out if it works. And then if it does, maybe I'll invest in something that's more expensive in the future. But the problem is that the cheapest ones tend to be ones that are likely not going to fit your staff very well when they're sitting. Probably fine when you're standing, not great when you're sitting. For example, most desks are about 29.5 inches high, give or take a half an inch. And so as someone who's only 5'2", 29.5 inches is actually really high for me. That's way above my elbow height. It's not the ideal working height. I would be best served to sit and work on a keyboard tray or have something that is significantly lower as my desk height. If I provide someone with a desk add-on unit or a fully height adjustable desk that does not go down to my elbow height, then I am probably doing the employee a disservice. I'm not actually helping them because I've actually probably made their sitting posture worse because I'm going to raise the working height a little bit. So we want to make sure that we get the right one. And the most important factor to consider here is elbow height. Can the fully height adjustable desk be lowered to elbow height? And if it can be, great. If it cannot, can we mount a keyboard tray to it if we need to? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It changes the weight of the desk. It might affect how the mechanism goes up and down. And then if you're looking at a desk add-on unit, do they need one that goes down below the desk height? What I mean by that is that the keyboard tray goes down below the desk. In many cases, it does not. The lowest height is desk height, and that is not an ideal for most people. Right? So the key factor here is figuring out elbow height and making sure that we get the right unit to accommodate our staff. Because if they're not in the right position sitting and when they're sitting, they're still going to sit likely for 50% or more of their day. And now we've made their sitting posture worse. It's very likely that we are creating a new ergonomic problem while we're trying to solve their back discomfort, for example. Question here is, would you recommend full height adjustable desk over the desk add-on if you had a good budget? Quite honestly, this is a great question. I personally like the fully height adjustable desk if you get one that has the right height range. I would buy a fully height adjustable desk that goes down to elbow height. So you need a desk range that starts at like 24 inches, 24.5, I think, and that would go up to a tall male's standing elbow height, which is, I don't even know what the height of that would be. I'd have to look that up. But you need a desk that goes through like 20 to 25 inches of range in order to accommodate both your smallest females working on the desk at elbow height and your tallest males working on the desk at elbow height. The reason for that is that a fully height adjustable desk is nice because your paperwork and everything is all at one level. When you do a desk mount, like the one that I've got pictured here, what you likely see is that this lady's telephone, if she had a phone on her desk, she does, a telephone, any paperwork that she would have, any other accessories, note-taking, etc., all happens at the desk height, which is quite a bit lower than what her standing elbow height is. So she would end up bending over in order to access all of those things. It's not as convenient to have a desk mount option on there. So I would almost always choose a fully height adjustable desk if your budget allowed for that. But it has to be one that goes through the full height range that you would want it to go through. There are also nice things out there right now that several companies are what I would describe as providing the legs, but not the tops. So you can, for example, from Ergocentric, you could buy just the base, and then you can mount your existing top on it. So if you have like cubicles and you have an aesthetic going on in your office so everything looks the same, you can essentially keep that aesthetic and give someone sit-stand options by implementing height adjustable legs and taking that surface off of the cubicle environment if that's practical for the layout and the way it works. But there are different options out there to do that too. So sometimes you can save yourself some money by using existing tops that you already have, which is kind of a nice feature. It's something to remember that usage is important. I was attending a webinar, so I don't have the direct reference, but I was attending a webinar and they were talking about usage of sit-stand. And if somebody does not have an injury or discomfort that prompts them to stand regularly, right? They experience discomfort, therefore they stand. And so ultimately what you get then is that you need to make sure that they are using it as often as you would like, right? So what we see is if you blanket provide it to everybody, lots of folks don't have any pain or discomfort. They're not prompted to stand. So they actually probably stand very little in their day. And then that's a sort of a debate, is whether it's worth investing in this for everyone when only a few people are actually using it to their full capability. Question here is, what about staff who want to sit, stand, and offer to choose to pay for themselves? We prohibited it so far for safety reasons, and if there's no valid medical reason. That's a choice that you'll have to make on your own here, I think, whether you want to go that route or not. I think most of our clients are in the same boat, that just like anything else, we don't really allow you to bring, partly because we don't know what you're bringing in, right? There's no way for me to guarantee that it actually is a good ergonomic fit, that it is safe, that it is appropriately height adjustable, that it's not going to crash on someone, right, because I haven't properly set it, or it's not meant to hold the weight of the monitors. There's a lot of factors to consider in getting the right sit-stand unit that I would say staff are quite unlikely to be able to navigate themselves. So I think probably, I would say most of my clients are in your boat. They don't allow staff to bring them in themselves for safety reasons, primarily, is the factor there. So that seems to be the sort of best practice to date on that. And if someone legitimately uses it, needs one, then from an employer perspective, we should be providing one, right? That if somebody needs that in order to be able to work safely and properly at work, then that is an accommodation thing that we should be providing. So if we have staff bringing them in themselves, it sort of muddies the water a little bit there too. So just things to think about, but best practice is probably what you're doing right now. All right, so let's talk about telecommuting, because I think this is one of the question that we got here, and it is becoming more and more significant of a problem and connects to all the other pieces that we are talking about today. This is likely, first of all, this isn't great anyways, but this is not likely what your employee's telecommuting office looks like, right? It's not likely a full desk with a keyboard and a monitor and several, it likely doesn't look like this. I mean, we've all been there, and this is potentially what your telecommuting environment actually looks like, right? That we need to consider several factors, right? We let people work from home, which is great, and we all understand the flexibility and the benefits of that, and on occasion how amazing it can be. But when we do that, when we allow someone to work from home, we relinquish control essentially over what their office setup and what their work environment looks like, right? We give that up. We allow them to work from home 2 or 3 days a week on a pretty consistent basis, and all of a sudden I have no control over what chair they're sitting in. If they're sitting in a chair, they might be sitting on a stool at a table, they might be sitting on their couch, in their bed, who knows? Whether they have a desk or a work surface, what height that is, whether it's meant for office work or not. Is it your kitchen table? Is it your kitchen counter? Is it a coffee table? Who knows, right? We don't control any lighting factors. We don't know what kind of chair, if there's a chair that they're sitting on. We may or may not have any external accessories like keyboards and mice. And we already know that saying working on a laptop is not the ideal ergonomic setup. So we have to navigate that process and figure out how we want to tackle this. Just saying, letting people work from home is fine, and I think probably at this day and age is really kind of the norm, that is at least an option on occasion, whether it's a regular thing or not. But the question becomes, who's responsible for the setup of the office environment? And do we provide the right equipment in order to, or do we provide anything in order to ensure that they are properly set up at their home office, whatever that might be? Right. So some best practices here is really probably about policies and procedures, right? This is maybe more like what you picture when you see someone telecommuting or working from home, right? Sitting on their couch on a laptop directly. This other individual is working from a coffee table, right? That's maybe more what you picture when you look at it. But if we are really getting down to it, we should be looking at sort of a telecommuting contract, or identifying roles and responsibilities here of what this part of our environment looks like. If we're going to let people telecommute, we need to make sure that, or we should at least consider clauses for working postures and workstation principles. So what does the employer expect from working postures at home? So we expect that you are working from a office workstation and that you are keying and mousing at elbow height, and that your monitor is at this height, right? Essentially putting in some of these pieces from the CSA standard and saying, this is what we expect your home office to look like. And this is what the posture and the principles that we're expecting to see at home. And then you may need to think about what you're providing for your staff. If you're handing them a laptop and saying, okay, then you can work from home, but they have no external accessories, now is it on them to buy that equipment, and how do we make sure that they've done that? I don't know the answer to that question. I think people are struggling with this at the moment, right? Do we provide them with a keyboard and a mouse to take home and maybe a laptop stand so that they can raise their laptop monitor up to the right height, and we know they're keying and mousing on full-size equipment because we provided that and they're expected to take that home with them, or that it's meant to be transportable, would be potentially best case scenarios here. But the other things that you have to decide how you want to tackle as you move forward. There is no clear-cut answer to this question at the moment, is how do we make sure ergonomics of the telecommuters or work from home folks is good? We don't know the answer because I can't always control it. Now, we have some folks who work from home permanently, right? We were just at a client the other day for an online web-based company. So there is a head office, but vast majority of their staff work from home offices, and they are given a spending account. So they have I've forgotten the total amount, let's say a $2,000 spending account. They're provided with a chair from the employer, and then they are provided with dollars to spend on other accessories for their home office. So maybe they're provided with a desk as well, maybe they buy one, any keyboards, mice, etc. They can expense all of that back to the employer. Now, again, not probably practical for some of your large employers that are working from home one day a week or one day every couple weeks. We're not going to give them thousands of dollars, likely can't afford to telecommute, but it is an interesting discussion to be having, is that we're without any control over their home office environment or any input over what they should be doing at home, any direction, then we may be opening ourselves up to some ergonomic injuries that are happening at work because we aren't controlling or providing any input into that environment. So there are some complications there that I don't think have been fully explored by most of our employers that are allowing folks to telecommute. Connected to telecommuting, depending on how it's being done at the workplace, are two topics called hoteling and hot desking. So I'm going to cover off both of those quickly here. Hoteling and hot desking are actually very similar. Hoteling is where there's no dedicated space at work. So these are folks that probably telecommute quite regularly, right? So they are either folks who maybe are in the field almost all day and they only use the computer somewhere for about an hour at a home office of some kind. Maybe it's a remote worker that isn't in the office very regularly. Maybe it's a telecommuter who works from home 3 days a week but is in the office for 2 days, or only comes in when they need to book a meeting or something like that. So essentially, the difference between hoteling and hot desking is primarily the fact that they book out a workspace. So they book out a workspace that basically provides the needs that addresses the needs they have for that meeting or that moment. So they might need a physical workstation for independent work, but they might very well need a large desk where there's multiple shared workstations and their team is going to sit together. They might need a boardroom where they're laying stuff out and giving presentations or whatever. They basically book a space that is relevant or useful for the work that they're doing. So we're seeing more and more of this. Primarily, the motivation behind why this is popular is that if you have people who work from home 3 days a week, but you give them a physical office location, that is a lot of valuable real estate that is only used 2/5 of the work week. So imagine, think about that, right? That real estate is one of the most expensive parts of any business, is the physical space that people occupy. So if I have a desk that's only used 2 out of 5 days, I have 3 other days where someone else could be in it. And that means that I don't need maybe 2 other workstations. And so that has a significant impact on the real estate that's required in an office and presents some significant advantage financially for employers. So if people are going to be telecommuting more or working in different ways, like a field worker of some kind only coming in part-time on occasion, this might be an option that people are considering. But there are some potential drawbacks to that. Hot desking is very similar to hoteling, but usually these are non-dedicated workspaces. So in hoteling, typically the expectation is that people book a space and then come in and use that. It's predetermined that they're going to be on site at the office for 2 hours on Tuesday afternoon, and they've booked a space accordingly so that they have that. Hot desking is typically temporary stations that are just used as needed. So somebody rolls in to the desk, to the office, they are there for 45 minutes or an hour. Maybe it's unexpected, not planned. They aren't there on any regular basis. Maybe they get a break between calls on occasion. They're close enough to pop back to the office for a couple hours. It is meant to be unbooked spaces that are just free range. Anybody can use them at any time. So sometimes that ends up being a boardroom table. It could be an unoccupied office. It might be a conference room. It literally could be any space that is unoccupied and available. People can drop down at. The problem is that they often don't look like the one that I have on my screen, right? They often don't look like, well, the problem with both of these is really that the ergonomics of both of these options is tricky, right? How do we address seating that is properly going to fit some people? How do we address adjustability in maybe a desk height, a keyboard and mouse height, a monitor height that's going to accommodate all of our staff? And then how do we make sure that they know how to properly use all of this equipment? Because that is the other factor. I might make a hoteling or a hot desking station that is flexible, but then I don't teach people how to use it properly or what their goals or intentions should be. Maybe they're not there very often, so they forget. So how do I make sure that they're trained to properly address all of these things? I had a comment here. He says, my sister's office at Sun Life is like that. She can't, this is one of the problems, is sometimes she can't get a desk space and has to work at a bench or a table. And she feels not being able to work at a proper desk and a proper chair is very difficult. And that is one of the challenges of hot desking in general, is that without that proper workstation setup, it can be really limiting for some people and really uncomfortable. And so that means we're potentially opening up ergonomic concerns by not providing some sort of fixed space, right? Everything that somebody works at maybe needs to have the right seat. How do I make sure that a petite 5'2" individual, 4'8" individual, and a 6'5" male are both able to work at the same workstations? And the answer is it's not easy. And so figuring out how you're going to navigate that, whether it's through more flexibility or variability in the workstations you have, looking at flexible equipment. If you do have a keyboard and mouse and like a keyboard mouse tray and a monitor, make sure they go through a really big range of height so that you're giving your staff who are just dropping in for temporary work at a non-dedicated workstation, give them the best chance at actually being in the right position. Right, but all of those things are factors that you'd have to consider to make the ergonomics of this type of a work environment, to minimize the ergonomic risk of this type of work environment. Last part to think about is the accommodation piece. No matter what, we still have a duty to accommodate, right? And so mobile technology may not be possible, or it might require some new devices or accessory changes if it doesn't work for the individual requesting accommodation, right? That this is something that we will need to explore potentially, is how do I make it possible for someone with a laptop or a tablet to use that when they have a hand wrist limitation or a shoulder limitation? What do I do here in order to make it possible for them to use it? And then managing accommodations when working from home is very challenging. So you have somebody who works from home 2 or 3 days a week, but I don't have a lot of control over what their workspace looks like. For example, I went into someone several years ago now, I went into someone's home office and they were using a gorgeous old desk. It was huge, it was wooden, it was beautiful, and it was not remotely ergonomic. And this individual was adamant that they were not going to get rid of the desk because it was in their open living room area. It was where they worked. They were like, oh no, I can't change the aesthetics of this area. Like, I'm not willing to get rid of this desk. And I'm like, I can't fix it. Like, there is no ergonomics here. There's some significant limitations to the desk about the way the drawers are, the locations. I would recommend you either cut it, which is like, I think the guy almost died when I said it. He was like, his face blanched when I told him he should cut out the drawer, or replace it. And he was like, no, not happening. And so non-dedicated workspaces can be really difficult for staff. Managing accommodations at home can be really difficult when you don't have as much control. And then obviously non-dedicated workspaces, like the example one of our attendees today just gave, can also be really challenging as well. And there's also some mental and cognitive limitations to that. When you are constantly changing your workspace, you never have a home base, you don't set up your own personal belongings or other things to highlight what's going on, that can be a limitation as well. Like, people struggle with that sometimes. So you have to think about this piece as well as sort of another layer to accommodation. So that is everything I had to talk about today in terms of different setups and webinar and content for the mobile technology and sort of office trends today. I'm happy to field some more questions if anybody has any. You could just pop them in the question bar there. But please, I hope you join us for our next webinar, which is coming up in September, on improved job matching for quicker and safer return to work. So that is available to be registered for now on our website, and it's on September the 26th at noon. So any questions, I'm happy to field. Otherwise, I will, I'll see you guys, or hopefully see you at next month's webinar.